think of vulnerability, I think of my little dog Lulu, who just, oh my gosh, races up to you and flops on her back and just has her legs up in the air and filled with love. So that to me is the essence of vulnerability. You know, we're each vulnerable all of the time. Every time we leave the house, we step into a place of vulnerability. We trust that folks on the road are going to stay on their side of the street and that they're going to stop at stop signs and stop at stoplights. And just having that place of trust, 95% of the time it works. And we can be trusting and we can be vulnerable in our travels. So, now I told you, you know, you guys know I went to see Mark Napo over the last weekend, and that was so wonderful. I had expectations, but my expectations were excessively met. He is a walking open heart, and it was amazing. But what he said about vulnerability, he said vulnerability means to carry a wound gracefully. To carry a wound so grace can heal it. To carry a wound gracefully and to carry a wound so grace can heal it. You know, we walk through this world and there's opportunity after opportunity to have a broken heart. Things happen, life happens, and our hearts break open. And he says, God keeps breaking our hearts until they stay open. So to be vulnerable, our heart must be open. And the open heart, the broken open heart, is the place that the mystery shines through. So, Brene Brown, I'm sure most of you have heard of her or know of her, and in her book, Vulnerability, in her book, Daring Greatly, she talks about the myth of vulnerability being weakness. She says, the perception that vulnerability is weakness is the most widely accepted myth about vulnerability and the most dangerous. When we spend our lives pushing away and protecting ourselves from feeling vulnerable or from being perceived as too emotional or willing to mask feelings, when we're told to suck it up and soldier on, we've come to the point where rather than respecting and appreciating the courage and daring behind vulnerability, we let our fear and discomfort become judgment and criticism. So the opposite of vulnerability is walls, and we hide behind them. And when we do that, we do not let the sweetness of the mystery shine into our heart. We miss making the connections with the world in that heartfelt place. We stop being trusting and we stop being vulnerable. So yesterday, as I said, I went to see Gary Simmons, who wrote a book called The Eye of the Storm, which is about dealing with conflict and confrontation in a different way. It's sort of like non-violent communication. But that wasn't the nature of his presentation yesterday. He was talking about the ways that our churches are being diminished, not just Centers for Spiritual Living. He's a unity minister, but all over the country. And the solution that he suggests that unity is moving toward is small groups, meeting people on a weekly basis in small groups, so that there's that opportunity to have an open heart experience, to be together in that place of genuine authenticity, like Steve talked about last week. And I thank you ever so much, sir. I heard reports that it was wonderful, and I really appreciate it.
Exaggerate.
No,
you
you
do
don't.
not.
You just say thank you or whatever. Anyway, thank you so much. She continues, Brene Brown continues. She says, vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper or more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. So we cannot come together with walls up and self-protection in community and expect to have a spiritual experience and expect to communicate with our community from that place of self-protection and guardedness. It just doesn't work. And I think the strength of this community is that it is small and we are willing to share from our hearts. And after the talk, and we have congregational sharing, that's so powerful. And I believe that we're rather unique in doing that. I don't think that other communities, spiritual-based communities, do that very often. So I just respect and applaud you for your willingness to be vulnerable. So another thing that Mark Naples said, now, he calls himself a poet and a mystic. And I have to admit that I thought, to be called a mystic, doesn't one have to have that as a designation? Isn't it a little arrogant? Now this is my thinking, please understand that. Isn't that a little arrogant to say, oh, well, I'm a mystic? Seems to me that needs to be designated by someone outside of ourselves. And I was having that thought, and just about the time I was making that judgment, he said this. He said, to be a mystic is to believe in a power greater than ourselves. What does that mean then? Thank you, Linda. We are all mystics. Yay! So feel free to use that designation to call yourself a mystic, because that's what brings us together, is the belief that there is something greater outside of ourselves. Whatever you want to call it, however you want to address it, however you want to approach it, you are a mystic. And because we are mystics, then our vulnerability is what allows us to be in spirit with each other. Our vulnerability is what allows us to acknowledge and recognize that which we call the namaste. That which allows me to look at you in the sacredness of your being. It allows me to see the God in you. And because we are all mystics, then we come together and we acknowledge and see the God that we each are. And we can only do that from that place of willingness to expose ourselves. When I keep my do not disturb sign up, I'm not able to connect with you in that deep spiritual way. When I have my do not disturb sign up, I don't let you see who I am. And I don't see who you are. It is only in our willingness to be vulnerable and to show the truth of who we are that we actually make those deep, rich, spiritual connections. When we actually sit in community and acknowledge the truth of who we are. Now, Mark Napo also addressed tears. Yay! And he said, without any prompting from me, I might add, that tears come through us. They're not of us. Tears are the stream of life. And when we cry, we are crying for all of the imbalance that is in the world. Just saying. I found that very validating. So Brene Brown continued in her Daring Greatly on page 45. She says, vulnerability is based on mutuality and requires boundaries and trust. It's not oversharing. It's not purging. It's not indiscriminate disclosure. And it's not celebrity-style social media information dumps. That is not vulnerability. That is ego speaking. That is, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. Vulnerability is about sharing our feelings and our experiences with people who have earned the right to hear them. Being vulnerable and open is mutual, and it is an integral part of the trust-building process. So just blurting out and dumping is not vulnerability. That comes from an ego place. And we have to trust. And we have to build trust and deserve trust to be able to share in that deep, precious way. So that's an important aspect of vulnerability. To know when you are being authentic actually genuinely speaking from your heart, or whether you're just in ego and seeking attention. Rabbi George Gittleman, I have no idea who he is, but I received this email. It's just amazing to me how things, when I'm available to them, just like Chris coming to find me, things come forth. Rabbi George Gittleman said, "Some people think vulnerability is just about being weak or narcissistic, without boundaries, letting it all hang out, wearing our emotions on our shirt sleeves. Not true. Vulnerability is about courage, authenticity, and faith. Being vulnerable is being real, showing up, and living your truth. It's also about reciprocity. So to be in that namaste place where I recognize the God in you and you recognize the God in me, it needs to be reciprocal. I think I've shared with you, and I'm going to share it again. This woman, I was in a group with her, and the question was, in what ways could your life be better? And so I shared from that place of vulnerability. Can't remember what it was. Probably the same issues that I deal with today, you know. And I spoke my truth. This is the way my life is not working, and this is the way my life could work. What needs to be improved? And she said, my life is perfect the way it is. Vulnerability has to be a place of reciprocity. For me to be willing to share, I have to trust that you are going to be in that same place with me. You're gonna be willing to be authentic enough to hear me, and I must be willing to be authentic enough to hear you. So in community, like we are here and that we are developing and we're getting stronger and richer every day, we have to be willing to trust that what's said here stays here, and that when we speak from our hearts, when we let the mystery shine through, that's going to be safe. And it's going to be understood. And when I share my heart with you, and you share my heart with me, your heart with me, being able to trust that I'm not going to be judged, that I'm not going to be criticized, that my story is going to be honored. And that part of vulnerability is that trust that that's going to happen. We come into this world totally vulnerable. We come into this world like my little Lulu comes into this world, just like, And then we're taught by the winds of life to cover our hearts and to protect ourselves and to be guarded. And then at some place, at some time, we understand that doesn't work for us. And we have to relearn how to be vulnerable. How to allow our hearts to be broken open. How our hearts are open to the mysteries of life, the mysteries of spirit. And I'm so proud of this community because we're moving into that place of genuine namaste. We're moving into that place where we can trust each other. And in that meeting yesterday, there was a lot of talk and conversation about the politics of a community and how people bring their old business and their old hurts into the community and they play it out in church. And I was smug in myself because this community, each one of you, all of us, have gotten past that place. We've had it in the past, but everyone who is here in their spirituality and in their authenticity and in their vulnerability. We're way past all of that nasty politics and all of that old business of playing out our family dynamics. And I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of each one of you, and I know that's not my thing. So I'll say to you, each of you can be proud of the way you show up in this community, the way you are authentic and vulnerable in this community. And I can say I have so much respect for each of you for that. And I can say, namaste. I love you.
Namaste.
Whatever that is. I'd invite Kate and Steve to join me as we hold ourselves in prayer. I allow myself to step into that open heart, that place where the honey of the divine drips through. I step into that place where the mystery of the divine shines through. I am so grateful for all of the good that flows into and through and around this community. All of the good that surrounds and bubbles up and shows through person that's here and each person of our community. And I hold gently in my heart each that is not present with us today. And I claim and declare goodness and blessings for each of us and for everyone that calls Circle's Edge their spiritual home. And in this quiet place and this quiet space, I allow my heart to break open. In love, in harmony, in joy, and in laughter. This moment is a sacred moment. This place is a sacred place. You are the divine manifest in unique, perfect, and powerful ways. And for that, and so much more, I am grateful. And I say, thank you, Mother, Father, God. And so it is.